Hello and welcome to Psych Chat here at Men's Radio Station. I'm Dennis Relojo-howell, founder of Psych. I love talking to people and learning about their stories. So in each episode of Psych Chat, I'll be talking to fascinating people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Join me here at Men's Radio Station every week and let's have a Psych Chat. Hello, welcome to Psych Chat here at Men's Radio Station. Before anything else, I just want to say a massive thank you to all who joined me on the first broadcast of Psych Chat last week. And for those of you who miss it, you can always dip into our website at mensradiostation.com, and you can also catch it on SoundCloud. Now, moving swiftly on, we're rolling into the second episode of Psych Chat here at Men's Radio Station. As usual, I'll be talking to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. I actually have two brilliant guests for today. First, we'll be talking about dyslexia, and then second, we'll be talking about male childlessness. Now, my first guest joining me for today is Jonathan Kemp. Jonathan Kemp was branded as stupid at school, but is now a human intelligence expert. Since 1999, Jonathan has been helping clients increase their productivity and efficiency in knowledge-intensive environments. Clients include investment banks, law firms, Big Four, and business schools. In addition to offering successful training programs, he provides bespoke training and consulting services, including working one-to-one with senior executives to help them focus on delivering their key strategies. His courses are designed to achieve quick, tangible results, and they are fun to do. I suppose this is coming from his lived experience of having dyslexia. So, Jonathan Kemp, welcome to Psych Chat.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Okay. Now, to start the ball rolling, Jonathan, just tell us, I already did a bit of introduction, but I don't want to miss anything, so just give us a bit of a snapshot of who you are, where you're from, and talk us about your experience of dyslexia.
Yes, sure. So I'm dyslexic, and I didn't actually know I was dyslexic until my late 40s. And for people of my generation, that's not too unusual. Mm-hmm. And so when I was at school and I went to university later on, I had absolutely no idea at all. What I did know at school was I didn't enjoy studying. Mm-hmm. I wasn't interested in studying. And I sort of came to a point where I thought, well, I'm obviously not good at this, so I'm really not going to bother. And I became much more interested in being a punk rocker. Punk rock had just come out at that time, and fishing all night. And neither of those are very good if you want to get good exam results.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say that people of your generation are not actually aware of dyslexia. But I could also relate to that, even though I was born in the 80s, and I'm originally from the Philippines, and during that time and in that part of the world, people do not really have an awareness of what dyslexia is, especially growing up during the 90s. It was more like, if you can't spell, if you can't read, you're stupid. So I could actually relate to that, although I don't really know much about dyslexia. So I just want to ask you if, how is dyslexia is? Does it affect everyone, or based from your experience?
Okay, so actually you raised a really interesting point, and I think that is correct. My understanding from speaking to other people is depending on what country you come from will depend on the level of understanding about dyslexia. So how does it affect people? So they estimate that sort of about 1 in 10 people are dyslexic, and every people who or everyone who has dyslexia, it'll be on a spectrum. So there's no sort of exact definition, and depending on where you are on the spectrum, it'll affect you differently. But the simplest way, or one way I describe of what dyslexia is like, is a difficulty in processing information. So, for example, if I'm reading something and I'm looking at it, I'll find it more difficult to understand than other people because of the way I process. But what's interesting, it's the same as when I'm listening to people as well.
Mhm. And I just want to delve more into that. When you meet people, do you sometimes realize that they might be dyslexic? Because right now you might have some excuses about poor spelling, especially like when you're tweeting or when you're texting. You just say like people do not really pay attention to proper spelling and proper grammar. So, what would be the telltale signs that someone is dyslexic?
A really interesting question. So there are sort of two levels. One is if I'm talking to parents and they're talking about their children, and it could be any age, and they sort of will make comments like, well, they're not doing very well at school, they're not very interested, they're causing a bit of trouble, but I know they're bright. And to me, that's a classic sign of potential sign of people with dyslexia, is that a lot of us are really bright, but because we have difficulty processing information in a traditional format, we end up being distracted, not paying attention, or a lot of us will muck about, for want of a better word.
And also, I think that is also true for other forms of, processing different information. I don't know if you've heard about dyspraxia,
Yes.
and dyscalculia, and these are, I would say, these falls within the same spectrum. So I think what we can take away from this is that we really have to understand that people process different information differently, process information differently. So it's important not to judge them as stupid. So, but I'd like to focus on your lived experience of having dyslexia. You mentioned earlier that it was quite late when you found out that you've got dyslexia. So tell me about your experience and how did it affect you career-wise?
Okay, so it's a good question. Well, I'd say the first impact, which was a lasting impact, was a lack of self-confidence. So, and that must have started when I was about 8 or 9, because everything was valued on whether you could study effectively or not, and everything was valued on your exam results. I was performing very badly in those two areas, and I couldn't understand why. And so I always felt, from a intelligence point of view, that I was less than. And that actually stayed with me for a long, long time. But interestingly, that also has a flip side, in that drove me to prove things and create things and do things that I might not have been so motivated to do otherwise. So there's lots of very sort of subtle impacts, but I'd say the greatest one was from school, that immediate lack of sort of confidence and belief that I was at the same level as other people.
Would it be right for me to say that it's also because you've got dyslexia that you also realize that you've got other talents, such as you mentioned earlier that at one point you toyed with punk music, is that right? Is that because of dyslexia? It's just coincidental?
No, I think that was because punk music, it's about rebellion, it's about not accepting what everyone else was accepting. So that what they were saying and what they were singing just fed into exactly how I felt in that moment in time. I did actually try joining a band, but even for punk rock, my singing wasn't great.
But other than that, would you say there's a range of impact when it comes to dyslexia other than academic, or does it also affect your socialization, your relationship with your friends and family?
Yes, it has a range of impacts. In terms of socialization, I think for quite a few of us, and again we're talking on a spectrum, but for quite a few of us, the flip side of being dyslexic is we may not be good processing traditional information, but often we're very sociable. And it's like we've developed skills for communicating with people, for getting on with people, which have almost, I'm not sure that compensated is the right word, but we've accelerated those skills. So a lot of people with dyslexia, you'll find, are in people-focused occupations like nursing, policing, army. A lot of dyslexics are entrepreneurs. A lot of dyslexics are in sales, and all that is about communicating with others. So there are flip sides. So where there is a negative, there is usually a positive.
Yeah, I would say it's like a form of compensation. I could actually relate to that because I'm an introvert and I process information more on writing, and I don't even know why I was presenting radio and don't even know why I'm a YouTuber. But um, I just want to explore more about the challenges that you encounter. You've mentioned earlier that you have barriers in relation to academics. Did you go to university?
Yes, so I'd never went to university straight after school. I was a cowboy in Australia for a year.
Oh, cool.
It was very cool, actually. And then I actually joined the Met Police for 12 years. And it was only after that I then went to university.
And while you were at university, how did you manage having dyslexia? Because what year did you go to university?
So I went to university in my mid-30s. And again, at this point, I had no idea I was dyslexic.
Was that during the 90s?
Yes.
Okay, during the 90s. And I would imagine that during the 90s, there was not a sufficient support in terms of dyslexia. Because right now, you would have support available if you've got dyslexia, if you've got other learning needs.
Yes, and it's a really interesting point, which I hadn't thought about until just now, is even though I knew I found it really difficult to study, it would never have occurred to me to go and ask for help.
Okay. Now, we'll explore more about that, your experiences at university as someone who's got dyslexia. We'll pause for a break, but for any one of you who's got, tuning in, and you've also got experiences about dyslexia, do give us a call. The number is on the website.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk? Download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Not ready for making tax digital? Struggling to keep up with changes? Or do you simply need a friendly and reliable face to handle your accounting needs? With over 20 years of experience, BBK Partnership in 5 London areas provide personal advice, and all our partners are readily available in person and by phone at times that suit you. Give BBK a call today, 0208 216 2520, or visit our website bbkca.com.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. Every seat is a premium seat. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
Now we're back to Psych Chat here at mensradiostation.com. Again, I have Jonathan Kemp, who's got lived experience of dyslexia, and he's talking about his experience. Now, earlier before the break, I asked you if you had struggles as a university student who's got dyslexia. By the way, which university did you go to?
I went to 2 universities, so because of my management experience in the police, I skipped doing a first degree, and I did a postgraduate diploma at Westminster Business School, and then I did a master's degree at Cass Business School.
And presumably these courses are, they've got lots of coursework and lots of writings involved. So I would imagine that you really struggled with this.
Yes. Initially, it was quite funny at Westminster University. I was sort of rather overawed about finally having got to university, and but very quickly I became overwhelmed by the coursework, and it was a real struggle. So what I did, which was very different to everyone else, I spent as much time looking at making the study process more effective as I did actually on the studies themselves. So I almost used myself as a guinea pig, and I looked at every element of the study process to see how I could make it more effective and more efficient. And even though it was still very difficult, by the end I was able to quite easily get distinctions on most of my work, because I had specifically focused on, okay, what do I need to improve, say for doing research, what do I need to improve when writing a report, and look at every single element that I could actually improve on, to the point that then I found it. I mean, I still work really, really hard, but I was getting distinctions quite regularly.
Good. So how did it impact your self-belief and confidence in self-focus? Because that's quite a dramatic change compared to your school experience. The university was kind of like you were able to deal with your dyslexia. So how did that affect your self-confidence?
Well, that's an interesting thing, because actually while the course was going on, because I found it so difficult, yes, it was really nice to be able to get those results, but what was sort of predominant and what was happening on a daily basis was the fact that I had to keep producing this coursework or keep preparing for exams, which I was struggling for. What I didn't realise at the time, but realised later on, that for most people, if they're going to study something, for me to study the same will take me at least time and a half, maybe twice as long to study the same thing. So I could never quite understand why I was putting in a lot more hours than other people to study the same thing. However, once I'd learned something, then I would very quickly accelerate past them. And I'd known that for years, but I hadn't just twigged, why does it take me so long to get to that sort of base point?
Now, pardon my ignorance, but I just want to understand more about dyslexia, because I don't know anyone who's got dyslexia. So tell me how bad is it? How bad is it, for lack of a better word? Is it the spelling, or is it really constructing the sentence?
Okay, so for me it's a range of things. I mean, if I was to take, for example, sitting in a lecture. If I'm just to sit in that lecture and I don't take any notes, what will happen, one, I find it very difficult to concentrate and my mind wanders very quickly. So that's a problem right from the start. A second issue is actually understanding the information. So as soon as I start, or my brain starts hearing theoretical words or terminology, it very quickly starts to scramble my thinking.
And you were doing business, so this is a course rich with terminology.
It was very rich with terminology, and terminology, because I'd come from the public sector, terminology that I'd never even heard of. And so what I did is I developed a form of note-taking which enabled me to immediately understand what I was listening to, and regardless of how much terminology or theoretical words, I would still be able to understand things at a very high level. So that was one impact. The second impact was reading. So I never particularly liked reading, and what I knew just from years of experience was that I will jump words, I will jump sentences, I will jump paragraphs, and sometimes I won't even realise I've done it. But more importantly, is that I find I can read something, and as I'm reading I think, yep, that makes sense, but then if you ask me to talk back about what I read, I would find it difficult to do because I hadn't really processed that information. And again, the note-taking technique that I developed helped me to process the information at a much deeper level. But the biggest impact was when writing reports. So they would give me a topic and say, can you write about this? And it happened to me at school, about 20 years before, particularly with English, is that I'd be given a topic and my mind would just go completely blank. And I just think everything in my brain would just saying, I can't do it. I don't know what to do. I can't do it. And when I get down in that position, it's very difficult to climb out. But on the university, you have like a week or a 2-week turnaround. So I'd have to come out of it really quickly. So then what happened is that dyslexia then impacted with mental health. And so I would almost be on a cycle. I'd get a report, I can't do it, impact my mental health, then I can do it. And so I'd be cycling up and down from a mental health point of view as well.
Mm-hmm. And you were experiencing this during the period where you're not aware that you've got dyslexia.
I had no idea I had dyslexia.
So it's really, it really makes things worse. Now, I just want to touch upon what you said. You develop a note-taking technique. This will be really helpful for those people who suspect they've got dyslexia or they think they've got dyslexia. Tell us more about this note-taking technique.
Yes, so it's easiest to compare it with traditional note-taking. So people who are doing traditional note-taking, so they're writing in sentences or in bullets, and they might be doing it paper or pen or with a laptop. Their primary focus and their primary intention is to get an accurate record of what's being said to use at a later point. Mm-hmm. And so to do that, for example, I'll listen to what you're saying, I will then store what you're saying in my short-term memory, and then I'll write it down as best as I can, as accurately as I can. Mm-hmm. But I'm not trying to understand it at that point, I'm capturing it so I can look at it later. Mm-hmm. Smart wisdom, however, is almost completely opposite. So although it's a handwritten technique, and it is a form of note-taking, my primary focus, the second I start using smart wisdom, is to immediately understand what you've said. And the fact that I have an amazing set of notes that I can use afterwards is an added bonus, but the real reason I use it, it enables me to understand what you're saying as you're saying it. And we've had it tested by cognitive neuroscientists, and they found that if you switch from using traditional notes to using this method I developed called Smart Wisdom, within 2 weeks, your understanding of what is being said goes up 12%, which is huge. And after a year, it goes up 20%.
And just to be clear, this Smart Wisdom is purely a note-taking technique, so
yes.
It doesn't really encourage people to pay attention to their spelling or pay attention to how they would structure a sentence.
Two very interesting questions. So the good thing about Smart Wisdom is, yes, and actually it's a really interesting point, is that you're not focusing on whether you're spelling things correct. In a way, you haven't really got time because your primary focus is, do I understand? So the emphasis on getting the right spelling or not, actually it's not really relevant because what you're focusing on is, do I understand? So a lot of that disability around, if I'm taking traditional notes, I'm focusing on my spelling. It's when you're using Smart Wisdom, it's not really relevant.
Good. Now, I just want to understand, because presumably this Smart Wisdom is, you're trying to help students, because that's a lot of, this is the period in life where not a lot of note-taking will take place. But are you also trying to cater to those people in the workplace? Because I would expect dyslexic people would be all throughout different sectors.
Yes, you're right. So what happened when I left university is that, so I'd spent 2 years looking at how people can manage information more effectively, and I used myself as a guinea pig. And I was able to achieve things that, in theory, I shouldn't have been able to do. So at the end of my master's degree, it was in international finance, trade and shipping, so it's quite a tough subject. and one of the lecturers said that my performance was one of the most impressive things he had seen in the 10-year history of the course, because of where I'd come from an education point of view. And the reason it was so powerful was that I performed at a really high level, but what enabled me to do that in part was smart wisdom. So I knew smart wisdom worked for studying. What I didn't know was, did it work in the workplace? And so for about, since then I started teaching people smart wisdom in the workplace, and what I found was that it is equally powerful in the workplace as it is in studying, but it also helps non-dyslexics as much as it does dyslexics. And the reason for that is because the focus of smart wisdom is on the immediate understanding of information as you hear it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to play the devil's advocate here. Surely, smart wisdom is just another form of note-taking. So, surely it can't be that much of a difference if you could just, get a pen and paper and try to make your own outline.
I like people playing devil's advocate. It's completely different. So the first thing that you'll notice is that smart wisdom uses a bullet type, a target type template with a series of concentric circles, and there is no other technique that uses this, and this template enables you to very neatly put all the major information in the center, and then you fan out the detail on the edge. And as you're collecting the information, you're immediately sorting it into relevant categories. So there is no other technique that I know of anywhere in the world that has this unique template. And there is no other technique that I know of that enables you to process information at this depth. And combine the two, that's why you get such a high increase in understanding.
Thank you for explaining that. Now, you don't have to really visualize it, because I'll take a picture of that and upload that on Twitter. But we'll be back later on. Thank you for listening to Psych Chat with Dennis.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hello and welcome to Psych Chat here at Men's Radio Station. I'm Dennis relojo-howell, founder of Psych Chat. I love talking to people and learning about their stories. So in each episode of Psych Chat, I'll be talking to fascinating people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Join me here at Men's Radio Station every week and let's have a Psych Chat.